The stories you're about to see involve several instances where cops got sentences in court that basically got them killed. As you can imagine, being a former cop in a prison cell places a premium on your head in the eyes of other inmates. This is why, like celebrities who are people of interest, cops are usually placed in wings or entirely different prison facilities where they'll be safe. So when these cops, some of whom were corrupt or sex offenders, were placed in regular prisons, it was like lambs being led to the slaughter. Some may even say they were already killed in court. Let's dive in and see what you think. Did they deserve it? Theodore Dyer. Blending seamlessly into the community as a well-adjusted individual. This is precisely why his heinous actions came as a shocking revelation to Mary, one of his victims. She later expressed her astonishment, saying, "I never had any reason to worry about him." When Mary and her 9-year-old daughter moved into the Grand Haven apartment, which was next to Ted Dyer in April 2012, they also initially thought they had a pretty normal neighbor. They talked on a daily basis, and to her surprise, Ted had a fondness for her daughter. What she did not know, however, was that this fondness was perverse. According to Mary, which is not the real name of the victim's mother, Dyer and his girlfriend never had children, so they adopted her kids. So about a year after they moved, in June 2013, Mary's daughter was at Ted's apartment, and it was late. Mary felt that it was time for her daughter to come home. This time she had a hunch not to knock before going in. Mary said, "It was just something in my head. Just walk in." Then Mary entered Ted's bedroom, where she noticed the door was cracked open, so she decided to take a peek inside. As she looked into the bedroom, she saw unfiltered Ted sexually assaulting her little girl. Immediately, she swung the door wide open, grabbed her child, and immediately rushed back to her apartment. While at her apartment, the first thing that she asked her daughter was if what she saw was what he was doing to her. To her horror, the daughter affirmed the situation. Immediately, Mary called the cops. Dyer was never immediately arrested, but was eventually convicted of 1 count of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. The police discovered that Ted worked for the Muskegon County Airport Police, and that Ted had assaulted Mary's daughter at least 3 times, although she had never told her mother about this. However, nature too can be ironic. 10 months into his prison cell, Ted would wind up dead. While Ted was in jail, he was paired in the same cell with Stephen Sanderson, less than 1 year into his life sentence.
How do you wish to plead to the second count of murder in the second degree? Guilty?
Yes, sir.
According to Stephen Sanderson, who was 51 years old, the killing was motivated by the fact that he was a child molester. He made this statement while in the Saginaw County Circuit Court. In court, he explained how he killed Ted.
The reason I killed him was because he was a child molester.
Sanderson mentioned that he learned from an undisclosed source that Dyer, a native of Grand Haven, was in prison for a really bad case of child molestation. On the night of Ted's death, while they were both incarcerated, Sanderson revealed that he confronted Ted, attempting to justify his actions. He ordered Ted to keep quiet and even threatened to have him moved to a different cell by morning. However, Ted continued talking about what he had done, trying to justify his deeds. Despite Ted's larger size, Sanderson didn't hesitate to engage him, hitting him in the face multiple times. When Ted fell, Sanderson quickly reached for a cord and strangled him to death. Before this incident, Sanderson was serving a life sentence without parole for a murder he committed in 1991. During his sentencing, he was housed at the Ionia Correctional Facility. Upon hearing the news of Ted's death in prison at the hands of his cellmate, Mary, according to her, she cried and laughed, and she experienced mixed emotions. Mary explained that she never wished death on Ted. Nevertheless, she regarded it as a small victory for her daughter, explaining, "So I think it was a relief for her, knowing that this wasn't going to happen again." While some might view Sanderson as a hero in this situation, he was very clear that he did not see himself as a hero. According to Sanderson, people had been sending emails stating that it was not his place to judge, and he emphasized, "I did not judge him. I know God is the only judge that we have. I just set the appointment up." In a moment of defiance, he declared, "I don't feel bad for what I did. I feel bad for maybe his family or something, but as far as remorse toward him, no." Sanderson was subsequently sentenced to life again, this time with the possibility of parole. However, James Gust, the attorney representing Sanderson, argued that the sentence Sanderson received had no practical significance due to Michigan law, which required Sanderson to serve his Dyer murder sentence in succession to his existing life sentence without the possibility of parole. Gust wryly quipped, before he can even begin this sentence, he has to die and come back to life. Gerard John Schaefer.
Schaefer liked to pretend that he was, quote-unquote, the greatest serial killer of women in this century.
If you're a fan of true crime, you've likely heard the name known by several ominous aliases such as the Butcher of Blind Creek, the Hangman, or quite fittingly for this episode, the Killer Cop. Schaefer is suspected of being responsible for the murders of up to 26 women. Prosecutor Robert Stone referred to him as the most sexually deviant person he had ever prosecuted, and fortunately, he would soon meet his own downfall following his conviction. Born on March 26, 1946, Gerard was the first of 3 children in the Schaefer family. His parents were Gerard John Schaefer Sr., a traveling salesman, and Doris Marie Schaefer, a dedicated housewife. Gerard's early years were marked by turmoil. He described his upbringing as troubled and turbulent. The constant moving, his father's battle with alcoholism, and his father's harsh treatment of his wife and children all contributed to this tumultuous environment. Despite his father's frequent absences due to work, their relationship was strained. Gerard felt overshadowed by his father's belittling behavior and what he perceived as favoritism towards his sister and brother. On the flip side, Gerard shared a strong bond with his protective and caring mother. As a teenager, Schaefer began developing erotic fantasies involving harming women he deemed contemptible.
Schaefer classified people into 2 categories, virgins and
To him, any woman he saw who had flaws was considered a and should be severely dealt with. All his life, he lived with one motive in mind: to exploit and abuse women. Right from an early age, the signs were there. He had a diary he used to relive his crimes, a diary he considered fiction, and that was used as circumstantial evidence in his sentencing. He also kept mementos of the crimes he committed. These mementos were mostly the victim's belongings, which were also used against him in court. In January 1971, 7 months before Schaefer embarked on his career as a police officer, he had a stint with the Wilton Manors Police Department that was relatively short, spanning just 6 months. He, however, secured a deputy role with the Martin County Sheriff's Department on June 23, 1972. On the afternoon of July 21, 1972, Schaefer encountered 2 teenage hitchhikers named while on official police duty. He drove the pair to their intended destination, although he cautioned the girls against the perils of hitchhiking. Upon learning that neither of the girls was native to Florida and that the 2 intended to travel to Jensen Beach the following day, Schaefer proposed to drive them to the location. The girls accepted his offer and agreed to meet him at a bandstand on East Ocean Boulevard at 9:15 a.m. The following morning, Schaefer arrived at the bandstand at the prearranged time. On this occasion, he was not wearing his uniform and was driving his own vehicle, although he convinced Trotter and Wells that he was still on duty. Shortly after the girls entered the vehicle, Schaefer deviated from their intended route. He then briefly lectured the girls against hitchhiking and the dangers of being sold into white slavery before stopping the vehicle close to a dilapidated shed deep inside a remote forest. There, he handcuffed and gagged the girls. He then took one of the girls to a sizable cypress tree near the Indian River, securing her legs to the trunk just below her knees and fastening a noose around her neck. He attached the noose to a branch in a way that forced her to stand on exposed roots to relieve the pressure. Schaefer followed a similar procedure with the other victim. At that moment, Schaefer received an urgent radio message instructing him to report to the police station immediately. He left both girls bound and perched on their makeshift platforms, promising that he would soon return. He exclaimed to one of his captives, "I gotta go." Both girls were warned not to try to run away. Schaefer claimed he needed to meet with the individual he intended to sell them to. Approximately 2 hours later, when Schaefer returned to the woods, he discovered that both girls had managed to break free. He hurried back home to contact his station, where he informed the sheriff that he had chosen to teach 2 girls a lesson about the dangers of hitchhiking, but had gone too far in the process. This led to his immediate arrest and sentencing of 1 year in jail, as the case against him was only for kidnapping. However, when prosecutors dug deeper, evidence started to surface that while the case he was initially in for was just kidnapping, and he claimed he was trying to teach the women some safety lessons, evidence showed he was capable of committing murders. Bodies started turning up with the trademark noose on their necks, dead and buried in the woods. He was soon found guilty of murders and then sentenced to 2 concurrent terms of life imprisonment. He even offered to be sent to a psychiatric hospital rather than prison. While in prison, it was known that he helped the police solve some cases. Most notably, he helped in the conviction of Mervyn Eric Cross, who had been discreetly operating an international softcore child operation while he was incarcerated. He even helped write a book. His prison life was very eventful, and his death was at the very least anticlimactic. In a dispute over who received the final cup of hot water with fellow inmate Faustino Rivera, Schaefer was stabbed over 40 times. Christopher Dorner. Now, most of the other cops on our list might have just plainly been giving into their perverse hedonistic mind, but our next cop just went rogue. He claimed in a manifesto that he was wrongfully let go from the force, and his action after that was payback for being treated unfairly. This was a pattern in his life, and his story will tell you why. Here is his story. Christopher Jordan Dorner, born on June 4, 1979, and raised in Southern California, completed his high school education at Cypress High School in Cypress, California, graduating in 1997. In 2001, he earned his degree degree from Southern Utah University, majoring in political science with a minor in psychology. During his time at the university, he was a running back on the football team from 1999 to 2000. Dorner served as a United States Navy Reserve officer, earning his commission in 2002. His assignments included commanding a security unit at the Naval Air Station Fallon in Nevada and serving with a mobile inshore undersea warfare unit from June 2004 to February 2006. Additionally, he was deployed to Bahrain with Coastal Riverine Group 2 from November 2006 to April 2007. On February 1, 2013, Dorner was honorably discharged from the Navy Reserve, holding the rank of lieutenant. In a notable incident from 2002, while he was a student in undergraduate pilot training at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma, Dorner and a classmate discovered a bag containing nearly $8,000 equivalent to about $13,000 in 2022 that belonged to the nearby Enid Korean Church of Grace. They promptly turned over the money to the police. When asked about their motivation, Dorner explained, "The military stresses integrity. There was a couple of $1,000s, and if people are willing to give that to a church, it must be pretty important to them." He also credited his mother for teaching him the values of honesty and integrity. During his time as a reservist, Dorner earned a Navy rifle marksmanship ribbon and a Navy pistol shot ribbon with an expert device. While serving as a naval reservist, Dorner concurrently joined the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD. His journey began when he enrolled in the police academy in 2005, successfully graduating in 2006. However, shortly thereafter, his responsibilities as a probationary officer were temporarily put on hold when he was deployed to Bahrain by the Navy Reserve. Upon his return from this deployment in July 2007, Dorner was assigned to work alongside training officer Teresa Evans to complete his probationary training. According to reports from the Los Angeles Times, on Dorner's very first day of working with Evans, he shared his intention to sue the LAPD once he had fulfilled his probationary period. This declaration was in response to how the department had handled complaints he had previously lodged against his fellow classmates. Dorner and Evans were dispatched to the Doubletree Hotel in San Pedro in response to a disturbance involving Christopher Gettler, who suffered from schizophrenia with severe dementia. Dorner subsequently submitted an official report in which he alleged that Evans had employed excessive force while dealing with Gettler. Dorner accused Evans of kicking Gettler twice in the chest and once in the face while he was handcuffed and lying on the ground. Notably, Gettler's father testified that his son had informed him of being kicked by a police officer. Dorner filed this report on the day following news that Evans's evaluation had criticized his own performance and suggested that he needed improvement. The LAPD conducted an investigation into Dorner's complaint, examining both the allegations against Evans and the accuracy of Dorner's report. This inquiry was overseen by an internal review board consisting of 3 members, 2 LAPD captains, and a criminal defense attorney. Throughout the 7-month investigation, Evans was reassigned to desk duty and was prohibited from earning income outside of her LAPD position. Dorner was represented by former LAPD Captain Randall Kwan during the board hearing. After the investigation and hearing, Dorner was fired by the LAPD for making false statements in his reports. He was treated unfairly and made a scapegoat, according to Dorner's attorney. Dorner's deadly rampage commenced with the delivery of a package outlining his grievances, which was sent to Anderson Cooper and reached CNN on February 1, 2013. Following the initial murders, the threats contained within his manifesto prompted law enforcement to launch an extensive manhunt that extended across California, Nevada, and even into Mexico. Protective measures were implemented for more than 40 individuals who were considered potential targets of Dorner, and a significant number of police officers were deployed to patrol highways throughout Southern California. In a bid to enhance their safety, the LAPD also withdrew patrol officers from motorcycle duty. Then he struck with the killing of Kwan's daughter and her fiancé. At this point, the police started a manhunt for him. They even offered a $1 million reward for any information leading to his capture. The police believed he was hiding somewhere in the San Bernardino Mountains. Drones were sent to search for him there. At this point, he had killed a police officer and attempted the life of 3 others. Then they were able to track him down to a mountainous rural area. The police surrounded the cabin where he had taken shelter and then shot pyrotechnic tear gas canisters, also known as burners, to force him out. Dorner was defiant. He shot himself in the smoldering fire. His body was recovered hours later after the fire had dissipated. This story was indeed tragic, especially knowing that things could have been handled better. Cabo Bruno. In the case of Floresvaldo de Oliveira, we see someone who meaninglessly killed others for the flimsiest of reasons. Also referred to as Cabo Bruno, he was a former officer of the military police of Sao Paulo state from Brazil, who gained notoriety as a vigilante and serial killer. He faced accusations of committing over 50 murders on the outskirts of Sao Paulo during the 1980s. He initially confessed to these killings, but later recanted his statements during his testimony. Floresvaldo de Oliveira, originally hailing from Uchoa in Sao Paulo state, acquired the moniker Cabo Bruno during his childhood in Catanduva. This nickname emerged as a playful taunt from his friends, drawing a comparison to a local alcoholic named Bruno, and even his mother began addressing him by this name. Cabo Bruno was notorious for his role as a vigilante, a figure who carried out killings based on his perception of justice, often targeting areas on the outskirts of Sao Paulo. While some claimed he murdered because he hated the fringes, there were indications that certain executions might have been motivated by the victim's appearances. He conducted his activities primarily during his free time, operating in the Jabaquara district, where some residents claimed that there was so much insecurity during his era. It was rumored that local traders were his primary targets, although he denied such allegations. Jose Aparecido Benedito was the sole survivor of Cabo Bruno's murders. He feigned death after being shot and managed to escape. Journalist Caco Barcelos played a significant role in bringing Cabo Bruno to public attention, as he covered the criminal's final imprisonment for Jornal Nacional. Most of the shootings he was accused of occurred in 1982, and the discovery of numerous bullet-riddled bodies in the region that year caused widespread panic. Cabo Bruno was initially arrested on September 22, 1983, under a court order, following accusations of being involved in over 20 murders, with multiple witnesses recognizing him. However, he admitted to only one of these murders, which took place on February 6, 1982, in the Jardim Selma slum. In this case, he was reported by a friend of the victim who survived the attack. Many years later, he acknowledged his involvement in approximately 20 murders. According to his second wife, some others falsely attributed killings to him, saying the other victims were blamed on him. There were people who committed murders and claimed to be Cabo Bruno. She explained that he accepted this because he believed it wouldn't significantly affect his situation. During this period, Sao Paulo's military police estimated that Cabo Bruno and a minimum of 12 police officers, including 2 high-ranking officials, were responsible for multiple executions in the city's south zone. Police reports indicated that many of these executions were based solely on the victim's appearance, including one instance where a young boy was killed due to a small cross tattooed on his wrist. According to Cabo Bruno's religious reasoning, any tattoo indicated a criminal. Initially, the gang appeared to be protected by higher-ranking officers, but as evidence and clues mounted, the entire operation unraveled. Following 12 trials, during one of which several other police officers testified against him, but the evidence was compelling, Cabo Bruno was sentenced to 113 years in prison. Despite attempting to flee 3 times, the last being on May 30, 1991, he was eventually incarcerated at the Jose Augusto Cesar Salgado Penitentiary in Tremembe. During this time, he claimed to have converted to evangelical Christianity and expressed a preference not to be addressed as Bruno. In July 2008, serving as a pastor in the ecumenical chapel within the prison, he married a housewife who volunteered there. In his role as a pastor, Cabo Bruno gained followers, including Lindenberg Alves, the famous murderer. In 2009, having served 1/6 of his sentence, Cabo Bruno petitioned for a conversion to a semi-open regime. The state public ministry requested a comprehensive criminological psychosocial evaluation, conducted in 2 stages, and yielding favorable opinions regarding the progression of his sentence, which was subsequently approved on August 19th. Despite transitioning to a semi-open regime, he was denied the benefit of temporary leave that year, which he could only have starting in 2017 due to his history of escape attempts. However, on August 22, 2012, the Tobat court granted him his freedom after 27 years of incarceration. The prosecutor's decision was based on a law allowing the definitive release of prisoners with exemplary behavior and imprisonment for over 2 decades. This decision was further supported by commendations from officials and management within the prison system, attesting to his conduct while incarcerated. Cabo Bruno laminated his original release permit and always carried a copy, along with a list of 10 dreams he wished to accomplish before his death. He humorously remarked, "In my escape, they would always stop me," he complained jokingly. Slightly over a month after his release on September 26, 2012, around 11:30 p.m., Cabo Bruno was fatally shot with 18 to 20 bullets in the Quadra Coberta neighborhood of Pindamonhangaba. He had been returning from a religious service in the municipality of Aparecida when 2 men attacked him. Fortunately, his relatives who were with him were unharmed. According to witnesses, it was 2 men who arrived on foot and only shot at him. It appeared to have been an execution. Cabo Bruno was declared dead at the scene. Gennady Mosovich.
Этот Михасевич, это настолько умный, хитрый и изворотливый зверь, что таких поискать.
Women disappearing from villages and winding up dead in the wilderness, a serial killer on the loose. Mosovich's crime was so prolific that it would take a lifetime before they would catch him. He was personally responsible for the death of 36, some even say 52 women between 1971 and 1985 in Vitebsk, Polotsk, and the rural areas around Belarusian SSR. All the police had was a pattern A noose on their neck. Here is his story. Gennady Mosovich, born in the village of Ist in 1947, had a dark history. After serving in the army, he embarked on a disturbing path. His descent into violence began in May 1971, triggered by the heartbreak of discovering that his girlfriend had married someone else while he was away. On the fateful night of May 14, 1971, as he journeyed from Vitebsk to Polotsk and missed the last bus to his parents' home, he found himself overwhelmed with despair. Contemplating suicide, he prepared a noose to end his life. However, fate took an unexpected turn when he encountered a young woman on the lonely road. Fueled by rage and anguish, he made a horrific choice to take her life. This gruesome pattern continued in October 1971 as he committed another murder, followed by the strangulation of 2 more women in 1972 near Vitebsk. Despite this sinister series of crimes, Mosovich managed to graduate from a technical school in Vitebsk in 1973 and returned to Ist, where he began working at a state farm. In 1976, he married, seemingly attempting to lead a normal life while concealing the dark secrets of his past. However, unbeknownst to those around him, the spree of murders persisted. Many of Gennady Mosovich's heinous acts were driven by his intent to commit sexual assault. His modus operandi consistently involved strangling or smothering his victims. Initially, he targeted individuals in isolated locations. However, as time passed, he adopted a more sinister approach, luring victims into his own red Zaporozhets car or vehicles at his workplace. Notably, he did not carry conventional weapons, but instead relied on various improvised methods, including using a cord made from rye in one instance. In addition to taking lives, he robbed his victims of money and valuable items, occasionally presenting some of these stolen possessions as gifts to his unsuspecting wife. He would also pilfer everyday household items like scissors. Despite his outward appearance as a devoted family man, a non-drinker, and a responsible worker with 2 children, Mosovich harbored a dark and sinister double life. He was even a member of the Communist Party and served as a local party functionary, as well as being part of the voluntary People's Druzhina, which was sort of a civilian police. The breakthrough in the investigation came in the 1980s when the determined investigator Nikolai Ignatovich firmly believed that the series of female killings near the region's motorways were not isolated incidents, as previously thought, but the work of a single serial killer. Suspicion also fell on the use of a red Zaporozhets by the perpetrator. As the authorities began scrutinizing all Zaporozhets owners in the oblast, Mosovich ironically participated in these actions as a member of the Druzhina, essentially searching for himself. This bizarre twist allowed him to gain insight into the investigation's progress, enabling him to preemptively learn about the steps the investigators were taking and plan his actions to evade capture. The year 1984 marked a particularly deadly period for the murderer, with 12 women falling victim to his brutality during that year alone. As the pressure mounted on Gennady Mosovich, he made a fateful error in his attempt to divert the investigation. To throw authorities off his trail, he sent an anonymous letter to the local newspaper, posing as a fictitious underground organization called the Patriots of Vitebsk. In the letter, he purportedly called on his fictional comrades to escalate their campaign of targeting communists and promiscuous women. Another disturbing move was leaving a handwritten note, signed on behalf of the same Patriots of Vitebsk, near his latest victim. This would be the beginning of his undoing. This calculated act led investigators to scrutinize the handwriting of male residents throughout the oblast, especially those who owned red Zaporozhets. After examining a staggering 556,000 samples, handwriting experts noticed a striking similarity between the handwriting on these notes and that of Gennady Modestovich Mosovich. Further investigation uncovered additional evidence that solidified Mosovich's guilt. In December 1985, he was finally apprehended. Psychiatric evaluations deemed him sane, but diagnosed him with psychopathy. Initially denying his involvement, Mosovich eventually confessed to his gruesome crimes. He was subsequently sentenced to death and executed by a firing squad in 1987.
Мне, говорит, правильно составить протокол. и ты будешь сидеть.
Mosovich's case gained notoriety throughout the USSR, known as the Vitebsk case. It exposed the extent of corruption within the investigative process, revealing how authorities had rushed to close cases. Tragically, by the time Mosovich was apprehended, 14 individuals had already been wrongfully convicted for the crimes he had committed. Some of them had even been sentenced to death and executed for crimes they had not committed, shedding light on the grave miscarriages of justice that had occurred. Carol Cole. Carol Cole was the second son of Laverne Cole and Vesta Cole. In 1939, after the birth of his younger sister, the family relocated to California, where Laverne, his father, secured employment in a shipyard. Not long thereafter, Laverne enlisted to serve in World War II. During his father's absence, Carol's mother engaged in multiple extramarital affairs, at times taking him along to these encounters and using threats to ensure his silence. This tumultuous period in his life left Carol emotionally scarred. To compound matters, Vesta subjected him to emotional abuse and compelled him to dress in girls' clothing. His school years were marred by merciless teasing from peers due to his girly name. This took a toll on his schoolwork, as he was only able to secure D's and C's in his school results. Despite his IQ test indicating he was a genius, securing over 150 points, also known as the alcoholic cannibal, Cole was an American serial killer who was executed for the killing of 2 women by strangulation. The belief is that he was responsible for the murder of up to 30 other people. Although he was not a cop, his father fought in World War II, and he enrolled in the military after he left high school but was discharged for bad conduct because he stole pistols. At the tender age of 8, Carol Cole carried out a horrifying act of vengeance against one of his classmates, a boy named Dwayne, who was also 8 years old. Carol's retribution took the form of drowning Dwayne in a lake located in Richmond, California. Astonishingly, authorities initially classified the death as an accident, unaware of Carol's involvement, until he disclosed the truth many years later in an autobiography penned during his time in prison. During a press interview, he chillingly revealed, "I was primed. I had made the mental commitment I was going to get even with my mother." During his teenage years, Carol's life took a downward spiral as he engaged in numerous petty crimes, earning himself multiple arrests for offenses like drunkenness and minor theft. In 1960, he contacted the police in Richmond, California, where he resided, confessing to the tormenting and violent fantasies that consumed him, particularly those involving the strangulation of women. Over the subsequent 3 years, Carol Cole found himself in various mental hospitals. At the last of them, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and unsuitable for release. However, he was released in April 1963. Following his release, Cole relocated to Dallas, Texas, where his brother Richard resided. There, he entered into a marriage with Billy Whitworth, an alcoholic stripper. However, this union did not alter Cole's deeply troubled perception of women. After just 2 years, their marriage ended abruptly when Cole convinced himself that Whitworth was involved with other men and subsequently set fire to a motel. He was later imprisoned for arson. Carol Cole's descent into depravity as an adult began with his first victim, Essie Louise Buck, whom he encountered in a San Diego tavern on May 7, 1971. After luring her into his car, he ruthlessly strangled her to death, later driving around with her lifeless body concealed in the trunk before eventually discarding it. Shockingly, just a mere 2 weeks later, he killed an unidentified woman and concealed her in a wooded area. Cole justified these acts by claiming these women reminded him of his unfaithful mother. In July 1973, Cole entered into a tumultuous marriage with Diana Faye Younglove Paschal, a barmaid who also grappled with alcoholism. Their relationship was fraught with frequent arguments and physical altercations. During these turbulent times, Cole would embark on murderous sprees while away from home, including an instance in which he allegedly engaged in cannibalism to a degree. Leaving San Diego behind, Cole resumed his nomadic lifestyle, where he also engaged in sexual activities and killings. Returning to Dallas after the Las Vegas murder, Cole claimed the lives of 3 more women in November 1980. He emerged as suspect in the second of these killings and was found at the scene of the third murder. He was subsequently arrested and held in custody. At first, the police concluded that the victim had likely died of natural causes, and Cole was on the verge of being ruled out as a suspect. However, it was at this juncture that he confessed not only to this particular murder, but also to all the other killings. Cole chillingly admitted to having murdered a minimum of 14 women over the preceding 9 years, though he conceded that there might have been more victims, as his recollections were hazy, often clouded by alcohol at the time of his heinous crimes. On April 9, 1981, Carol Cole was found guilty of 3 of of the murders he had committed in Texas. He received a life sentence and was incarcerated at Huntsville Prison. In 1984, following the death of his mother, Cole's demeanor appeared to undergo a transformation. Surprisingly, he decided to confront additional murder charges filed against him in Nevada, even though doing so could potentially lead to the death penalty. In February 1984, Cole was extradited to Nevada, where he faced trial and was subsequently convicted for the strangulation deaths of 2 women that occurred in 1977 and 1979. His sentence, handed down in October 1984, was the death penalty. Remarkably, when the judge pronounced his death sentence, Cole responded with a chilling, "Thanks, Judge."
Do you deserve to die? I can't answer that question. For what I did, yes, I think I deserve to die.
Cole's last interview showed that he was ready to die, and he knew the gravity of his offenses. We hope you liked this video. To see more videos like this, kindly click on the cards on your screen.